radio station.
Today's Outlook is scored by the music of a man known as the Boss. Sarfraz Mansour was growing up in a Pakistani family in the English town of Luton when a friend lent him a Bruce Springsteen cassette.
It was the song The River. And Bruce is just talking, and he's talking about him and his dad. And he says, when I was growing up, me and my dad, we used to go at it all the time about almost anything.
I was 17 or 18. Oh man, I used to hate it.
Some people have a moment that changes their life forever. For Sarfraz, this was it.
I was really struck by the storytelling and the openness and the directness of Springsteen's words.
Join me, Emily Webb, for an interview about how music can help you to imagine a very different life. First, the latest news.
BBC News. Hello, I'm Jerry Smith. British opposition MPs, together with some members of the governing Conservative Party, are stepping up plans to reverse the government's decision to suspend Parliament weeks before the country's scheduled departure from the European Union. Government ministers are still insisting that the move, announced by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, is not a ploy to silence Parliament. But the BBC's Naomi Grimley says many analysts are sceptical.
Lots of constitutional experts have been poring over this, and they all seem to agree that the length of this shutdown of Parliament is longer than at any time since the war. So it does reduce the window of opportunity for his critics to get their act together. On the other hand, it might act as a spur for them now to get on and try and agree a strategy to at least stop a no-deal Brexit, which at the moment Boris Johnson seems prepared to countenance.
The opposition Labour Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell warned that his party wouldn't allow Boris Johnson to act like a dictator. He said Labour would use every mechanism available to thwart the suspension of Parliament. Negotiations between the European Union and Britain continued in Brussels on Wednesday, but the two sides didn't manage to bridge their differences. The talks follow demands from the new British government for changes to the agreed Brexit deal. The Italian president has given the outgoing Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte a mandate to form a coalition government, this time involving the Democratic Party and the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. The new alliance is expected to take a few days to agree a government programme and a team of ministers. Danny Eberhard has the details.
Mr. Conte set out his priorities. These include making Italy's economy more competitive, combating corruption and promoting environmental sustainability. The administration's tone on Europe will shift too, especially with Matteo Salvini's Nationalist League heading into opposition. Mr. Conte's vision has Italy at the heart of an integrated Europe. His team will need to win a confidence vote in both houses of Parliament.
China has indicated it won't immediately impose retaliatory tariffs against the United States in a sign that it's trying to curtail a bitter trade war between the world's two largest economies. Celia Hatton reports.
In a sign that China is trying to dial down the damaging trade war between the world's two largest economies, Beijing did not announce a plan to hit back against the Trump administration's imposition of tariffs on almost all Chinese goods entering the U.S. Instead, a spokesperson for the Chinese Commerce Ministry, Gao Feng, said that China has sufficient means to take countermeasures against the United States. However, he says it wants to discuss the cancellation of tariffs on $550 billion worth of Chinese goods.
News from the BBC. The government of Yemen has accused the UAE, a key part of the coalition that's been fighting on its behalf, of launching airstrikes against its troops. The accusation comes after reports that a number of government soldiers have been killed by an airstrike reportedly carried out by the UAE. On Wednesday, the Yemeni government claimed that its forces had recaptured the southern city of Aden from UAE-backed southern separatists who seized it earlier this month. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says Japan will help Africa double its rice production by the year 2030. He said Japanese technology would play a key role in helping Africa produce 50 million tons of rice a year. The aim is to encourage small-scale farmers to grow food to sell as well as food to eat. Ukraine's new intake of MPs have been sworn in following last month's elections, in which President Volodymyr Zelensky's new party won a landslide. From Kiev, Jonah Fisher reports.
This is another big moment in a year of dramatic political change in Ukraine. 80% of the MPs being sworn in today are newcomers, and a clear majority of them belong to a party that supports Ukraine's comedian-turned-president, Volodymyr Zelensky. No previous Ukrainian president has controlled both the executive and the legislature, so the pressure is now on Mr. Zelensky, a political novice, to start delivering on his ambitious, if rather vague, promises of reform.
New figures from the World Health Organization show there have been 365,000 new cases of measles across the world this year, the highest numbers since 2006. The WHO says weak health services and misplaced public fears about vaccinations are two of the main causes behind the disease's resurgence. BBC News.
Hello, I'm Emily Webb and welcome to Outlook, bringing you extraordinary stories from all over the world. Today's guests' lives have all been transformed by music. From the singer whose grandfather was known as the Sound of the Nile, to the one and only Nina Simone in Liberia, to Sarfraz Mansour. Now, he's a British journalist, not a musician, so may seem like the odd one out. But Sarfraz's life has been shaped by a rock star on the other side of the world. Sarfraz spent his early life in the English town of Luton, just north of London. When he was growing up there in a Pakistani family in the 1980s, the UK was going through a difficult time. There was a growing immigrant community, and racism and racist language was common.
Within an hour, 200